topic would be a syntactico semantic study of complex predicates in Eastern Indo-Aryan languages, which includes the less resourced languages, of course, right? So when we say less resourced languages, it is more prone towards the resources to the languages which are not very much focused towards having much resources, right? So these are the different stages my presentations will go through. So the paper proposes to investigate the syntactico-semantic aspects of complex predicates in Eastern Indo-Aryan less resourced languages, including Magahi, Bhojpuri, and Sambalpuri. Right. It also deals with the polar and vector verbs, including the object-verb agreement in the nominal part of the conjugate verb under syntax. It focuses on the classification of polar and vector verbs based on transitivity and intransitive aspects under semantics. When we say complex predicates, it is a kind of predicate that is incorporated with two different linguistic entities. It could be a verb, it could be a serial verb, it could be a compound verb, it could be and totally resulting into a new linguistic item sometimes. It includes in compound verb, the first component of the compound, as we all know, is the primary or the main verb, which is also known as the polar verb. And the second one, which of course is known as the V2, which is the second verb, is the vector ones. This polar verb occurs in root or the stem form in many languages. The name polar is attributed to it because it contains the core meaning of the complex verb form. The research in CP has drawn attention from several areas of linguistics, such as morphology, syntax, semantics, grammar, natural language processing, which is one of the part of the AI in today's world in recent years. These languages taken in the custody, such as Magahi, Bhojpuri, and Sambalpuri, belong to the eastern branch of Indian languages family and are less resourced or less investigated in nature. It also investigates the syntactic and semantic aspects of the CPs in Eastern Indo-Aryan languages, the three which I mentioned, and it deals with the polar and the vector verbs and the object-verb agreement in the nominal part of the conjunct verb syntactically. It classifies the types of CPs based on the transitivity and the intransitivity criteria semantically. Coming on to the literature part of the presentation, literature review part. In Magahi, Bhojpuri, and Sambalpuri, the V1, the CVs and the V1 is always in root form, as in the case of Hindi. So this means that with all these three languages of the CVs are not very much different. There is no much difference seen. The second component of the compound verb is the light verb, of course, which is often termed as a vector one, as I said earlier. It is the explicator and is semantically delexicalized and bears all the grammatical inflections such as person, number, and gender, tense, aspect, and mood of the sentence. The vector verb mostly does not retain its lexical meaning and functions as an auxiliary attached with the main verb. It, however, plays a main role in explicating the meaning of the polar or the main verb. So the compound verb is also called an explicator compound verb because it takes on the meaning sometimes. The methodology which we have used is in this is the qualitative approach at first, because there are three different languages mentioned where the data has been collected from three native speakers and has been verified as such. The observation method has been applied while the data collection and analysis are concerned. The data has been analyzed on the basis of description method modeled on general linguistics. The polar and the vector verbs in CPs have been described across to the framework adopted by the Hooks paper. Conjunct verb, which of course is one of the CP, which is an object-verb agreement. We can observe that the nominal component acts as an argument, which directly agrees with the finite verb. For example, there are certain instances mentioned for three languages. In Magahi, when we say Sunilva ke Rakeswa par bharosa hai, which means Sunil have faith on Rakesh, and in Bhojpuri it says Sunilva ke Rakeshwa par bharosa ba, and in Sambalpuri Sunil ra Rakesh upre bharosa ache. So the direct object faith agrees directly with the verb be, right? So Sunil has faith on Rakesh, as we say. Mathli again is Sunil ke Rakesh par bharosa che. It, like, there are not much differences we can see in Maghi, Bhojpuri and Mathili, but there are, yes, certain differences can be seen in Sambalpuri and Bengali, which says Sunil Rakesh ke bharosa kare. Odia again is Sunil ra Rakesh upre bharosa ache. So Sunil has faith on Rakesh. So here in this we can see that there is not much differences mentioned in Maghi and Bhojpuri, but yes, there are certain differences with other languages as well. Again, when we talk about the semantics of the CPs, which is V1 and V2, where V1 is intransitive and V2 is again intransitive. Both the verbs V1 and V2 are intransitive in nature. In other words, verbs in these examples can take only one object. Like in Magahi, Rukmini Kunya par se gir gele. And in Bhojpuri we say Rukmini Kuima par se gir. Like in Sambalpuri we read it as Rukmani Kuima upre sorli gila. So I'm sorry, I'm not very much acquainted with Sambalpuri. It is something that Pitambar has taken care of. So which means Rukmini slipped from the well. So it is again the two intransitive verbs. In these examples can be seen, and one can observe from the following examples in this section that the polar verb is an intransitive which can take only one object, whereas the other vector verb is transitive in nature. Like in Magahi, Silpiya batwa par jor se hasle. Again in Bhojpuri, Silpiya how now u becomes how here, batwa par jor se has tehlas. So again in Sambalpuri it's Sulpiya se kotha re jor se hasi nila. So Mathili again is Silpi u bata par zor se hase lagli. So it somewhere depicts some changes in Bihari languages, and I'm not sure about Sambalpuri and Oriya again, which of course at the end of the session, at the end of my presentation, Pitambar will be very much able and capable to answer this. In transitive and now again there is a different condition with transitive and intransitive, which is a V1 and V2 again. Is a compound verb where Magahi Sunilva sabhe mithaiya kha geli, which means all the sweets have been eaten by Sunil. In Bhojpuri, Sunilva sabhe mithaiya kha lehlas. So again we can see that there's not much changes, but yes, there are certain ones which can be seen. In this kind of compound verb phrase, the polar is a transitive one, while the vector is also a transitive verb. In Magahi, Jaya hamar sabhe kapadwa dho dilke. Now, if we say dho, there is again change in a word which we sometimes use as peach, which again means the wash. Peach dilai ya dilke. Now again, Jaya hamar sabhe kapadwa dho dehlas. So again, this is same thing I'm discussing. Jaya hamar sabhe angocha. Now the kapda becomes in Mathili angocha. Saf kya delkai. So karna becomes kya because it's takes some markers at the end. Now moving on to the conclusion part, the study is confined to the three Eastern Aryan languages: Magahi, Bhojpuri, and Sambalpuri. Syntactic and semantic approaches have been applied for the description of CPs. For the future aspects, this study will be beneficial as the languages at hand are less resourced in nature. Other related aspects such as multi-word expressions in these languages will be taken up for the further linguistic inputs. While we have mentioned here multi-word expressions is as such because complex predicates is again something which we can mention under the criteria of multi-word expressions. These are my references. Questions? Thank you.
Okay, Shivek and Pidambar, you have touched upon a well discussed and well researched topic within the Indian language linguistics tradition, and there have been a lot of work since the early 70s, if not the 60s, on these expressions. Pratibha Pal is saying something here. In Bengali, সুনীলের রাকেশের উপর ভরসা আছে alternative.
Okay, so I think here he's suggesting upon the sentences which has been translated by me in Bengali. So, sir, this I accept this because this is just because I'm not one of the speaker of Bengali. So,
I think you had Kore, right? You had Kore or something.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not Kore, it should be Ache. That's fine. There's something else. Is it a comment from Chandan Kumar? What are some of the differences syntactically as in the presentation? It is indicated some differences are there.
Yes, there are certain differences. As we can see, there are differences with within Magahi, Bhojpuri, and Matali. All the three being under the one cap of Bihari languages, there are certain differences while we speak. I think I'm able to answer Chandan sir's question. I'm not sure.
Orko Banerjee is asking, Shivek, are you going to use first phase model to account for their syntax or some alternative one? I can answer that on their behalf. From whatever we have seen, I don't think they're using first phase model.
The first question was, what are the tests that we've used to distinguish between the compound and the serial verbs, right? So there was no test as such. It was just that if we take as an example, we say, सुनील तुम जाते जाते मुझसे मिल लेना, या मैं खाते खाते चला गया. So I can see when we work with all three different languages, we have not seen any of the differences in the agreements. The only difference is like हम जाते जाते खा लेंगे. Here you can see there is only differences we can see with hum, but not the other things with where we mention a subject, we mention as the third subject, or whatever it is. Now the second question which was very much there was, are we going to use first phase model to account for the syntax or some alternative ones? So for this question, I am not very much acquainted with syntax as the honorable chair is. I am more of a computational linguist working with Professor Girish Nath Jha in the university.
I already answered that question. You couldn't hear.
I'm not more of a, no. So if there are any suggestions to that, I'm open to it. To it.
Yeah, the first question is very important. I think I should take it in the right spirit, because I also asked whether the question that Param asked, Parameshwari, I also asked about the test, because that's the first thing that one has to really engage in when looking at complex predicates or compound verbs or any such combinations. And you have clubbed together verb auxiliary combinations, serial verbs, compound verbs, complex predicates all together as complex predicates. Then you need to also distinguish them, and there are well-known tests for that. One is how many events it is depicting, and you can check the literature. You will see that there is a difference in that. There are other semantic tests which may not be immediately accessible to people who are not familiar with it, but certainly there are many syntactic tests which have been discussed. This is, you're lucky, because this is one area which has been well studied among Indian linguists, and you will find the tests to figure out the subject properties, etc. It's not just agreement, and not just, sometimes the event is a complex event. So it may not be single event, but it is a complex event. and it need not be sequential to separatable events. Those are the semantic tests, slightly difficult to access if you don't have theoretical background, but the syntactic test you should be able to do.
All right. I'll take this as a suggestion and we'll work on to improve
Yes,
this
yes.
in future.